This is ATA 2017, episode number 5 with John O'Brien of Grandpa Ray Outdoors. Welcome to another episode of Whitetail Rendezvous. This is your host, and this is day 2 at ATA 2017. And with me with me today, I have John O'Brien. John is an ag man, 26 years of agriculture. So you think food plots, well, John thinks agriculture because he has grown crops, fed cattle, all out throughout the Midwest. John knows his stuff. John O'Brien, thank you so much. And he is the president of Grandpa Ray Outdoors.
Thanks, Bruce, and glad to be here at the ATA. And look forward to talking a little bit more with you. And I think this is the first or the third time that I've done a podcast with you, and I'm glad to finally meet you in person.
Well, that's great. And folks, yes, John's been on the show. He's did a webinar with us, and we never met. He's out of Madison, and I went to school in Wisconsin, so we're kind of neighbors, but we just never met up, and that's one great thing about ATA. Before we get into it, what is important to you about ATA, and why do you show up here?
This is the first time I've showed up at this event and brought a couple guys along with me, and we did a lot of networking, met people that I've talked to in the past, and it was good for networking, good for learning about some of the new products and services that are out there in the industry, and all in all, it's just you see a lot of these kind of things at other events like the different deer and turkey classics around out there, but yet this is a little bit different situation where it's all more high-tech, high-end, industry-related products and services, and a lot of the new stuff that's going to be coming out that people maybe haven't seen before.
No, from your business, and basically you're an ag man that's in the food plot business, and I was told by a gentleman just in Wisconsin alone, seeds sell $5 billion worth of seeds. Is that a verifiable statement, or was somebody having too much beer?
And this is one thing that when I started Grandpa Ray Outdoors, I was trying to educate people on the seed world. And my background is, I've done nutrition work for 26 years here now. I've done seed for 25 years. And the seed world is actually really large as far as volume, but really small as far as the amount of growers that are in the industry. So, there is differences in quality and freshness and things like that. But when you buy your radishes, when you buy your clovers, you know what? There could be 5 or 10 people in the U.S. growing some of these forages and some of this genetics. So even though large by volume, small by the seed distribution, the little seed chain. You got your growers, we got our conditioners and cleaners, we got our distributors, and then we got a lot of these people that you'd be seeing at ATA that are buying from probably one of the regional or local distribution chains. So
thanks for that. And in earlier shows, if you haven't caught it, listeners, what I'm going to say next is real important. You go to a big box store, and John's going to share how to read a label, because you have no clue of what you're buying, because you're paying hellacious amounts per pound of seed when you buy it from the big box store. John, your thoughts?
Yeah, we've touched on it in the past, and so I'm sure that if people want to get into a little more depth than that, you can check out some of my you can listen to my thoughts on that on other podcasts. I'm also posting on different social media sites, different topics about 3 times a week, and so we'll also be sharing that again. Maybe that's a good thing I can re-release this upcoming week. Tag Reading 101. And so, look for that on my website, grandparrayoutdoors.com, or also Grandpa Ray Outdoors on Facebook. But just real briefly to touch on that, looking at a label. It's not rocket science, but yet very few people probably do look at a label before they buy products. So the first thing I always want to look for myself, not that I'm having to buy products, but I do, scout what's out there a little bit. Also to educate people a little bit. And I might take pictures of some stuff on different shelves that legally seed has to be retested every year in most areas of the U.S. Other areas, it might be every 18 months. First thing is look to see what the seed testing date is. Then look at what the germ count is. Then look at what's the weed count. Do you even have any noxious weeds listed on the tag? One big name company which I actually have planted some of their stuff in the past, they actually had noxious weeds listed on their tag. So I'm thinking, I don't know if there's too many people out in the industry or end users that would want to be planting anything that had noxious weeds on it. You know, some people can, maybe they're happy with it, but I'm not planting anything with noxious weeds because my dad would kill me. He's supposed to be semi-retired, but he's spraying noxious weeds. And there's weeds that we've found that the neighbors blessed us with because of the wind and Mother Nature that took 3 days for the University of Wisconsin to figure out what was that weed. So that's just a couple of thoughts. And, you know, if you guys want a little bit more information in depth, we'll be doing some visual aids and we'll do a little blog and a teaching tool with that topic this upcoming week, since you brought it up.
Yeah, and how much does coating add to the weight of what we're buying?
Yeah, the industry typically, you see a lot of these seeds that are coated at 35 or as much as 50%. And so I will not sell any seed that's coated unless you cannot get it. You know, there's a few species that we've been testing out there outstanding. Right now, the grower is not going out to the end user as uncoated. So basically about 98%, 99% of the seed I sell is actually uncoated because I want pure live seed. The industry, there is some advantages of coating. There is growth promoters that are typically put on some of these. These coated products, there is one advantage where it could, you know, help on dry years with seed germination. But you know what? I got a solution. I use natural growth promoters on all my seed. And so we're getting pure live seed, but we're getting roots underneath the plant. We're drawing moisture to that root. So it's all about the roots. And guess what? Instead of getting a bag, if you had 100 pounds of clover that's 35% coated, but you're really only getting 65 pounds of seed.
Well, wait a minute. I'm paying full price for that bag.
Yeah, which means that maybe Grandpa Ray's isn't that smart. Maybe we need to go back and do like everybody else has done.
Yeah, because my margins are higher buying the big box store. But a big box store.
Yeah, but so many people don't even look, or there's so many people I'm shocked that don't understand what coated seed is, or if they buy a bag of seed. Here's something that came up when we were driving down to the ATA show. Or maybe it was even, yesterday too, because I've had so many conversations. Okay. Besides coated seed, how many people, if you ask them the seed that they bought, was it inoculated? Whether it was soybeans or your clovers or your alfalfa. Anything I sell is inoculated because you know what? What happens if somebody, it isn't inoculated? I don't put inoculant on there. The average guy is not going to think about inoculating. And I used to be a part-time fireman. I hate putting out fires. Why do I want somebody to call me and say, hey, your seed's no good? No, it isn't the seed. So, and there's a lot of people that have planted soybeans out there, and they were saying, "Hey, we had a problem with growth on that." And I said, "Well, did you inoculate it?" Nobody ever told me to inoculate it. The guys that sold them the seed never even reminded them that, hey, we don't have inoculation. We don't have the seed isn't inoculated. So, tip of the day for people: look at the tag, and before you buy a seed from somebody else, make sure that it's inoculated. And if it's not, you better buy inoculation.
Okay, what is inoculation for this poor city boy?
Okay, so I'm going to try to think of a way to say this to the best of my ability for the average guy. So soybeans, legumes in general, will fixate their own nitrogen by nodules, so if you don't quite understand that might be another little visual video that we can shoot sometime down the line to actually pull. And I probably got some pictures out there, and I should dig them out. And it's so, when you pull a soybean plant and you look closely and you see these little round kind of ball project off the roots there, that's those nodules, and so that's your legumes that are fixating nitrogen themselves. Okay, but even though you have legumes that are supposed to fixate nitrogen, but if they're not inoculated, that's where you're not going to get a good amount of nodulation. So, okay, here's another little tip. Let's just say you buy beans from XYZ company, and you forgot to ask them if they're inoculated, and they're in the ground, and you didn't inoculate them, and you call John O'Brien and say, hey, my beans don't look good. I forgot to inoculate. I remembered, and I forgot to inoculate. My answer is, think what would apply 40 units of nitrogen. Because the plants, if you forget to inoculate the soybeans or the clovers, because they're not producing their own nitrogen. You just need to treat them more like all these other forages and give them a boost in nitrogen because they're not, fixating it themselves. So that's a little tip, about 40 units of nitrogen. So, and here's something else that came up with some people. They're like, well, why do I need to put nitrogen on my new seeding clover plots? Okay, we got inoculant on them, but for a lot of companies, they might not have inoculant. But even in that early stage when they're just starting to develop, there's nothing wrong, and you might with nitrogen, and you might need a little. But the thing that's very overlooked, and everybody talks nitrogen, but you'll see in my blogs and my posts is I talk sulfur all the time, which is sulfur is important to convert nitrogen. And I know I'm getting a little technical now, so I'll probably stop rambling on here. But for those of you that want to get a little bit more information and listen to me get a little more in depth, that's what my seminars are for. And again, you can find a lot of these videos on the YouTube channel, which is Grandpa Ray Outdoors on YouTube. The website again is www.grandparayOutdoors.com, and the and on Facebook it's facebook.com/Grandpa Ray Outdoors. And again, I get in a lot more depth with all these different topics, and there's probably about 3 different educational posts every week that I'm putting out there on social media. And also on Twitter, which is @O'Brien, OBRIONAG, on Twitter.
So, John, you have trained me. The first thing that I need to do is do a soil test on all the places I'm going to put in my food plots, micro plots, major plots. It doesn't matter. I need to know what's in the ground today so I can put in the ground tomorrow what the seed that's going in the third day needs. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, okay. So many people don't take soil tests. And so, and I could tell there's a certain amount of people out there when I do seminars, they're still not convinced how important it is. So here's my little analogy. So, everybody talks about pH, and of course pH is super important. But then there's also organic matter. And of course, the phosphorus and the potassium levels. So here's why it's important to take a soil test. The guys that don't take a soil test, one of the first questions they'll ask is, what fertilizer should I use? So now I'm going to be I'm going to be your investment banker. You got all this hard-earned money that you made in your life. And I'm going to say, okay, I want to take your money. You're going to give me $100, but it's going to cost you $50 for me to invest at $100. Are you going to want me to be your investment banker if half that money is going to me right off the top? No. Who would do that?
No.
That's the same way it is if you don't have proper pH. So if your pH is, let's say, 5.0, which is very common for people that haven't limed before, you're only getting about 47 to 50% of the use of their phosphorus, potassium, and nitrogen on that fertilizer you put down.
Wait a minute. So I bought 100% of fertilizer, but the ground's only going to use 47%.
Yeah.
So I have it right?
Yeah. So let's say you're going to your local agronomy center, co-op, feed mill, farm store, and you're just going to do a generic recommendation like everybody does. And let's just say you get some 1515 and you put 4 bags per acre, because that's like 200 pounds an acre generic recommendation. But yet you didn't take a soil test, and your pH, let's just say if it's 5.0 or below. So right away you spent, $60 an acre on fertilizer, but you only got half the use out of it. Who would do that? Actually, way too many people right now, and that's the sad part. So
that's sad, though, really.
Yeah, just go back to my analogy. Who would invest Who would invest, with somebody, and half that money you're not going to see any kind of potential for return on it?
You would, but we don't know.
Yeah, it's unknown. So if people say, hey, they haven't taken a soil test, I always assume worst case scenario. Okay, but then again, the other extreme is you could have toxicity issues. You can cause harm if you're the other extreme. Maybe you got high pH and excessive phosphorus and potassium. So everything in life is simple math. It's all about balance, and it's all, starts with pH, and then it goes from there. So soil tests, a lot of guys have been sending soil tests in the last couple of weeks. First thing you need to do this time of year, and if you're not sure how to read your test, people are more than welcome to email or get me the results, and then the next step, and it could be that same day, scouting your property. I mean, hunting season is done now in most areas of the U.S. Now is a great time to go out there and see where the travel corridors are. Some of these areas that you guys have been staying out of, because, you know, everybody knows there's some of these sanctuaries, you don't go stomping in there because otherwise the neighbors are going to shoot all your deer on you, right? And so, you know, good to scout your property, see where their bedding areas are, learn a little more in the lay of the land, because the lay of the land might be different than what it was the year or two before, which is something I learned, you know, this year, even myself, on property that I've lived on my whole life. So, anyway, so great scouting, and maybe that same day go out and take a soil test. Some people say, well, when should I lime? And if it's April and May, it's maybe too late. Well, it's really not too late, but it takes up to 6 months for that, you know, for that liming material to typically work. So I've done a lot of liming in, you know, November, December, January. And if you drive down the road and you see this time of year, the big, you know, the co-ops with their big units out there, they're liming. I've seen a lot of liming done now because it's their slow season. It's a great time to lime. You lime in January. You know, even if you're using an egg lime, of course, a lot of this stuff is going to be starting to kick in as we go, you know, throughout time. But a good chunk of this is going to be utilized then by May or June. So now's the time to scout your fields, take a soil test, and all that. So
when we're talking about scouting your property, you know, if you hunt in the same 40, you know where the deer are coming and going. But the thing I found, sometimes the pressure of the previous season has changed their activity, especially the bucks, or the intensity of the rut. All of a sudden they go, I'm tired and I'm going to go where the forage is best, and I'm not going to go too far. Have you seen that?
Yeah, we actually talked about it with another guy that I have a relationship with, really smart guy that actually we have a relationship with now too, where he goes on to a lot of places and does private consulting, and he has tested out my products for the last couple of years, and we had a little conversation on that this morning. And the thing is, you know, so many people say, you know, well, the neighbor shot my deer, or I was seeing deer for part of the year, and then of course I stopped seeing them, which there's so many factors that could come into play. You know, one year, one spot, which could be great, might not be so great the next year, because what's on the neighbor's land? Was it corn this year? And the next year's probably beans, and the following year's probably corn again. You know, and so there's a lot of factors, and, you know, hunting pressure. I mean, these smart old bucks get used to when they've been pressured. And so in my case, I've hunted these same kind of stands for many, many years. And then because we're running a lot of trail cameras and we know pretty much what's on the property, again, we weren't seeing some of my hit list bucks. And so I'm like, you know what, I could do something different. And I thought before the season, let's just put a stand out there that I may or may not use, but it'd be like a good backup plan. So I hunted my backup plan. That nice buck came out exactly where I figured he would. And I was really patient. I will never take a shot that deer's not going down. I waited a little while for a little better shot. And of course, he turned just like that and walked away. You know what? It was still a great experience. And it taught me, you know what? I was thinking out of the box. I was thinking about, hey, I might need a backup plan. Where would these old bucks that would normally just come out right at dark or maybe just after dark? But he's still not just going to park himself in that woods. They're still going to be looking for hot does. And it basically came out like the way I thought it would. And that's what I'm talking to people about, you know, this year too, is, you know, what should you do if all of a sudden you think the deer are gone? They might not be gone. They just might be in an area where they know that you're not going to be. And when I look at a lot of maps throughout the day and different people I talk to, I mean, you can learn a lot from aerial maps. And also that's why I like to know what guys are planting, where they're planting it. And there's, of course, always so many factors that come into play. So, but that's half the fun.
Oh, yeah, that's sure half the fun. Now, let's go to everybody's sitting here. It's mid-January, and the Packers are winning. Go, Pack, go. And we're thinking about the spring prep. What do I need to do? Because you and I both know and have talked about, you know, deer hunting is a 365 project, and we have to set up our rotation and our crops and our cover crops and the different types of feeds. We want high protein when the does are lactating and so forth. And so let's talk about what we should be doing today to get ready for the spring. So we're going to have the best forage on the ground come the summer when the butts are growing their horns.
Yeah, and actually, for food plotting, it's kind of the opposite of the farming world. The farming world, you plant stuff in the spring and then you plant cover crops in the fall. I want people to think about planting cover crops in the spring for your fall plots, because there's so many people that do only plant fall food plots. And I'm thinking, why would you do that? Because the deer take vacations and they don't eat from spring through fall. Or if they are, I mean, we do want them to be eating, the clovers. And yeah, if it's in farm country, they're probably in the hay fields and so on and so forth. But my goal every year is at some point during the year, I want to fixate nitrogen. At some point during the year, I want to build up organic matter. So what are we doing? We want to plant a cover crop. Why do we want to do that? Okay, we're going to fixate nitrogen. We're going to build organic matter. We're going to suppress weeds. So when you want to work the ground before the fall, and that we already got the weeds under control, so that you don't have to call John and say, hey, John, I got your stuff that's growing good, but God, weeds are really bad. And my answer would have been, well, that's what cover crops are for, and you should have worked on it in the spring. So let's set up our fall plots starting the spring. So the guys down south, that might start as early as February. The guys in Wisconsin, when do the guys plant oats in your clovers and your alfalfas? It might be early April. Could be early May. So I came out with a soil building mix that you could plant anywhere in the U.S. It's got peas, oats, triticale, annual clovers, and buckwheat. Grows fast. The deer, it's really good nutrition there when the does need it, and everybody needs to eat, right? But so we got great forage. We're fixating nitrogen, building organic matter, as I said. But the big thing that people overlook is when we turn that down in the ground, we're tilling in a bunch of organic matter. So when you do we're assuming you listen to me and you put the lime down in the spring, and you also by having these cover crops, we're smothering weeds like we talked about, but by building up that organic matter. When you put the fertilizer down, and we have a big rain, which this last year in Wisconsin, we were super wet, you're holding that fertilizer. So again, let's just say your pH is right and you did what you're supposed to do, but Mother Nature always comes into play. Super wet. If you have more organic matter, you're going to hold that fertilizer, we'll get more use out of it. So my thing is, no matter what you're doing, whatever money you spend, why not get the most use out of whatever you're spending money on, whether it be fertilizer or seed?
Thanks for that. And as we're about 20 minutes over, and the ATA shows are running about 20 minutes, folks. John, when you look at the overall industry, there's a lot of people out there selling seed. And I get it, because there's money in selling seed. But how do you figure out who really you should listen to?
Well, and here's what we talked about with numerous people, and even with Cody and Lee with Boot Trac Adventures on the way down. And I did a little video, so people go on there and they want to learn a little bit about maybe what you should do. On Grandpa Ray Outdoors on Facebook, I went live. But I'll give you those little, what I talked about real briefly here. So for me, I'm used to being an independent nutritionist. And I have an independent seed group as well. I'm used to being independent. The farming community, probably 95% of the farmers that are still in business that are milking cows work with a independent nutrition consultant. I still do some of that. Most of the progressive crop farmers, probably, and I don't know that percentage, but it's probably 80, 85, 90%, work with an agronomist.
No.
Why do you think they're doing that? Well, because they want to stay in business. Okay, so many people put seed on a shelf, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's a certain amount of population that just wants to go out there and grab something. But it's like insurance. There's a high amount of risk when you do that. So for me, I did start Grandpa Ray Outdoors to raise money for disabled youth hunters education, other worthy causes. But I'm an educator. That's all I've done my life. I've been independent. I've consulted. Every situation is different. So let's just say you're still going to go to one of my dealers, or buy from online, and you're going to buy my products. I want you to talk to me to get me as much information as you can, so that I can tell you maybe this mix is better than the other. I want to work with you. Very few people in the industry want to work with you because A, it takes time. B, they might not have a good answer, and me, I'm willing to go the extra mile. So I don't want people to buy from me because it's great seed. I want you to buy from me because you want to have success no matter what Mother Nature throws at you. So we're not a fair weather company. When there's extreme weather like the South had, where there's hardly any rain, or in Wisconsin where there's all this excess moisture, you call me and say, hey, something's not looking right. I'll say, send me a picture, and we'll figure out what happened. We can solve or correct for a deficiency in the moment. So we'll always have a solution. So you know what? You're buying my expertise, and if you like what I'm educating and telling you, then buy my product. And if you don't want to buy my product because you're happy with XYZ company, I do have a newsletter program. It's $20 a year. You get a monthly newsletter where I post stuff that I won't even tell Bruce Hutchin on social and other places.
Thanks, John.
And on social media. Well, maybe I'll tell you off the record if you buy me a drink later or something. But anyway, so there's a lot of things that, and you know the wildlife industry is a copycat industry, right?
Yes, it is.
Oh, I got you to admit it. I thought you were pausing a moment.
No, it's not in my head.
Anyway, so
you can hear that on the radio. But
I do pretty much tell people, as much as I can to try to educate you. And there's really not any hidden secrets. I mean, I'm really not that smart, but the sad part is there's so many of these little tips that don't cost you hardly any bit of money. The guys all the time are like, God, why didn't my current guy do that? Or why didn't I know that? Or why didn't anybody tell me that? I don't know. You answer. I mean, I have an idea. You probably have an idea, but that's the sad part.
Well, John, on behalf of thousands of listeners across North America, check out Grandpa Ray Outdoors. And if you do nothing else, every single person I've sent to John to help out, John's called them, had a discussion. One of my friends up in Birchwood, Wisconsin, John went up and walked the ground, and John will do that for you. So I can't endorse him any more than that. He's a good friend, but he really knows what he's talking about. And so when you have somebody like that, it's easy to say, hey, give John O'Brien, Grandpa Ray Outdoors, a shout. So, John, thanks for being on the show today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Bruce. And, we'll look forward to maybe doing this again sometime when we get into the season a little bit farther. So thanks for your time.
Thank you, folks. And that ends ATA 2017 with John O'Brien.
It's never too early to think about food plots. Whitetail Rendezvous has an ebook for you. Just simply text 33444 food plot to get your copy.
Thanks for joining us. Be sure to tune in tomorrow for another episode of Whitetail Rendezvous, where you can listen and learn from the experts so you can be more successful on your next hunt. Until next time, listen, learn, and succeed.